Now this is bullshit, Mercedes-Benz. Here's a crazy idea. Why not build your components with the tolerance and maybe expectation that some owners are going to want to wash their car?
Here's another one of those scenarios where just because it's wearing a premium brand does not mean it's a premium product. And mechanically speaking, here's why.
It's wonderful. But I think the issue I have with this is that, okay, being a Mercedes-Benz, you'd expect these to offer the highest possible build quality and unmatched levels of refinement. And you'd think, being one of the brand's most popular and important models, they would have pulled out all of the stops to make the C-Class a category leader in every possible way. So therefore, you'd think buying a used example would be a smart financial decision. Is that the case? Well, you're about to find out, because we're going to take you through all of the critical to know information about the C-Class, starting with what goes wrong with the exterior. Now we're just going to be focusing on the 4th generation or the 205 series C-Class, but specifically not the AMG models, because we've already made a C63 video. The link for that is down there, and we'll get to the C43 soon. But a lot of what we mentioned in the AMG video also relates to these. This includes all of the issues surrounding the doors and sunroofs creaking and making weird noises. Now this is more prevalent on the pre-update cars, although in saying that, some owners of relatively new cars are also complaining of weird sounds coming from the car's various orifice. But then when it comes to the sunroof, I tell you what, some owners wish it was as simple as just some strange noises coming from it, because these things, they're known for complete failures. Now look, chances are if it's serviced and lubed regularly, you're not going to have a problem with this. But if the gears jump or those stupid little plastic wheels fail, the whole sunroof can just drop and then it just refuses to close. And guess what? Fixing that can cost all of the thousands of dollars. Some owners have been quoted from their local Mercedes dealerships over $5,000 to fix this, which is just daylight robbery, because there are independent guys out there that'll do it for less than $3. And then in front of the sunroof, loads of owners have complained that this black plastic panel can delaminate just like this. Now the issue here is that while the panel apparently costs around about $500, some owners have been quoted in excess of $5,000 to replace this, because the sunroof has to come out, the windscreen tucks under this part, but then that risks breaking the windscreen, and these things are like $4,000 to replace. It's just ridiculous. And worse still is that when some owners have questioned the Mercedes dealership about if this can be a warranty claim, Mercedes have denied the warranty claim, basically blaming this on car shampoo and car cleaning products. Now this is bullshit, Mercedes-Benz, because if this is caused by car washing fluid, here's a crazy idea. Why not build your components with the tolerance and maybe expectation that some owners are going to want to wash their car? And then we come to the silver or the black trim around the windows. As you can see here, these can sort of fade and discolor a little bit, or on the black trim it can get like a rainbow effect to it. Now unfortunately, really the only way to fix this is to replace these trim pieces, which you would expect would be hopefully a warranty thing, right? Well, for so many owners, unfortunately no. Their Mercedes dealerships are refusing to replace this under warranty, because apparently it falls outside of their warranty requirements. And then we get to the wheels, and especially if the car is wearing an AMG pack, apparently the wheels are made of cheese. There are so many reports of wheels buckling or cracking. In fact, one of the owners we spoke to mentioned that the wheel repair guy that he employed to fix his wheels mentioned that Mercedes-Benz make up for about 80% of his overall work. Now this isn't just because the wheels are not very resilient when it comes to driving, but also the standard run flat tires that these can come with, they tend to exacerbate the issues as well. Now I should mention the cost of a Mercedes-Benz OEM rim, especially considering how weak they are, is ridiculous. This rim, a replacement, around about $1,500. And if you're just looking at getting the rim fixed, again, maybe avoid your Mercedes-Benz dealership, because they're going to ask ridiculous premiums. Now we're going to assume that the original owner of this car optioned it to have no badges on it, although it could be one of the other common issues with the exterior is that the badges can get really loose and even just fall off. Okay, next up, and look, I swear this has nothing to do with one of our partners, but plenty of owners have complained that the OEM wiper blades can just chatter as they go across the windscreen. But you know what fixes that? Wipertech wiper blades. Okay, it's time for another Wipertech challenge. Will it wipe? And today's victim, an egg and lettuce sandwich. Now before we see how these wipe, remember Wipertech wiper blades are so easy to order online, fitting them is super simple, and if you order a set via the link, you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. Let's see how they go. Okay, egg and lettuce sandwich. Here we go, go for it. Jesus. That's not too bad. it's screechy. Oh, okay, look, they struggled at that, but let's be honest, they're going to handle anything that you can throw at them. Get yourself a set today. Now, it's important to know the C-Class has received a fair share of recalls. This isn't necessarily a bad thing because it does show that Mercedes-Benz are trying to fix any of the possible issues while also avoiding any potential lawsuits. But if you are in the market for one of these, just make sure that any of the recalls have been seen to. Now, the next big complaint we came across all of the time was just trying to decipher the model range, because depending on where you're watching this from, it can be incredibly confusing. Even here in Australia, we've had over a dozen different combinations of trim specs, models and engines and whatnot. But the thing is, when you break it down to just the mechanical packages, it's actually pretty simple to understand. For the Australian market, Mercedes have taken basically a single petrol engine, a couple of diesels, and to keep those wanting hybrids happy, also thrown in a couple of electric motors. Tuned each of these combinations differently so they can offer different models and therefore give the impression of a diverse model range, and then they called it a day. Now, most of these will come with a 9-speed auto. However, a few 7 speeds are also out there, but no matter what, in Australia, they all send power to the rear wheels. We missed out on the all-wheel drive 4MATICs. Now, obviously, internationally, there are even more options than just that, and even here in Australia, there are clearly more details about the C-Class. But if you do need all of those details and also all of the common issues written out so they're really easy to refer to, go to ReDriven.com and check out the free C-Class cheat sheet. It's basically the ultimate used C-Class buying guide. Now, just on the whole international thing, if you're interested in buying one of these because you admire German manufacturing and the whole European car image appeal thing, it is important to know that while plenty of these were made in Germany, a whole stack were actually made in South Africa. And that's nowhere near Europe. Nothing wrong with that specifically, but you just should know these things. But one thing that is very European is the way it looks. Now, I don't know about you, but I think this is a stunningly good looking car, also helped by the fact that it's a wagon, and as we all know, wagons are by far the coolest cars you can buy. Now, if you are in the market for one of these and you're trying to decipher if the car is a pre or post update just by looking at it, well, if you're not a C-Class anorak, look at the front grille. Pre-update, you're going to see a few different slats like this. Post-update, just a single slat and a whole bunch of little chrome dots that make it look like one of those drone shows at nighttime. Personally, I prefer the looks of the pre-update. They both look fantastic, granted, but I don't know, the pre-update for me just looks a little bit classier, a bit more sophisticated. But I tell you what, hasn't it aged well? This design is 10 years old now, and for me, it just still looks the absolute business. But you know, one thing that hasn't aged well, it's the price. Brand new here in Australia, this actual car was asking over $75,000. These days, under 25 grand. That means it's lost $50,000 of its value in just 8 years. That's 2/3 of its value in 8 years. That's insane. Even when it comes to more recent examples, take a 2023 E300 Coupe. Those things retailed a year ago for about $110,000. These days on the used market, about $80,000. It's lost $30,000 in just 12 months. That's ludicrous. But the problem with all of this is it seems that the depreciation never seems to slow down, because there are some 2014 examples out there asking just 15,000 bucks. And look, yeah, granted that is a base model with loads of kilometers on it, but even then, that was a $65,000 car when brand new, 10 years later, and it's lost, what, 3/4 of its value? It's nuts. And I mean, compare that to something like a Mazda 6 or a Toyota Camry. You know who's gonna win the depreciation challenge? It's not the fancy brand. Now look, before we get into what can go wrong with the interior, I need to make this as incredibly clear as I possibly can. We totally understand that this video almost paints the C-Class in a light that it's an absolute nightmare of a car. But for so many people out there, for so many C-Classes, that's simply not the case. We researched through countless owners groups and forums and spoke to Mercedes-Benz technicians, and a massive thank you to everybody that helped us with the research for this video. And even though the list of common issues is concerningly long, there are so many owners out there that have never ever had a problem and probably will never ever have a problem. However, there are plenty of other owners out there that have had such a run of issues with these cars that they've sworn they'll never buy another Mercedes-Benz ever again. And this seems to be arguably the biggest issue we found with these cars in general, was just a massive inconsistency in build quality. And I'm sorry, Mercedes-Benz, that is just not good enough. The problem that we have with this is that Mercedes-Benz markets themselves as this premium product of brilliant vehicles. So at the very least, we should be able to expect consistency, right? And well, clearly that's not the case. place. For example, apparently the vegan or the synthetic leathers in these can wear prematurely. We're talking rip apart and get little dots in them, like little holes in them. But then on the flip side of that, the genuine leather interiors apparently are really resilient. And that's even in the really high traffic areas like the outside seat bolsters, steering wheels, everything like that. Another common complaint we found across the owners groups was just check all the roof lining, because some of these do their best impression of an old Ford Falcon and lose their adhesion and it starts becoming like an upside down parachute inside. Now, plenty of owners have had an issue with the window switches just breaking off, and depending on how this breaks, sometimes it can spring out and fly into the abyss. And guess how much some owners have been quoted for a replacement window switch? $700. Are you joking? It's not like it's made of diamond or even really anything of high quality. That's ridiculous. But the larger issue here is that that dodgy window switch build quality can extend to the rest of the interior. Owners have reported that the silver trim around the rotary dial and the trackpad and all around here can flake off. And even the button that opens the center console, it can break. Also, the silver finish can also come off pretty easily too. And then some owners have had to replace their dashboard timber multiple times because it keeps cracking. The worst one we found was that one owner had to replace it 4 times in just 3 years. And then if it's the gloss black finish, well, plenty of owners have complained that that just scratches up super easily and looks filthy in seconds. And then there are just honestly countless reports of these interiors creaking and rattling. Now, I find this one personally really disappointing because while everything in here clearly looks absolutely beautiful and the ergonomics are spot on and everything you actually touch feels just so premium, you get this sense that everything going on behind the scenes is just a bit shit. See, so much of the structure holding this utterly beautiful interior in place is made from plastic, and for many models out there it just seems that the plastic is not resilient at all. But then on the flip side, other cars like this, no dramas, no rattles, no weird creaks. It's excellent. However, in saying that, this car is suffering from a common issue that the C-Class can experience, and that is its, let's say, toxic relationship with electricity. Honestly, we read so many issues and complaints with things related to electronics that we simply don't have time in this video to run you through everything. We're talking seat motors failing, to trackpads playing up, electrical parking brake malfunctions, LED interior lights flickering or just dying, to various buttons working inconsistently or just failing completely. This particular car is having an issue with its door module, which is a pretty common complaint. Basically, it just comes offline, but this impacts everything on the door. So we're talking the seat adjustments, the window switches, the mirror adjustments, the blind spot monitoring, the lighting, it all can just fail. But then drive it for 20 minutes and it all comes back online again. And then sometimes it turns off again. Then sometimes it comes back on again. Who knows? But guess how much for a replacement module? Well, Will, the owner of the car, has been quoted $900. Also, this is one of something like 40 different modules and computers scattered through the car. Oh, also on electronics, some owners complain that their air conditioning can just stop working or work inconsistently. Plus, there are other owners out there that are getting like smells of mold coming through the air conditioning. Look, basically, if you're in the market for one of these, try every single function. I mean, every single function. And then maybe try it again. And then maybe give it a third shot just to be sure, because the issue is if one thing goes, it can be a chain reaction and it can cause other things to start failing and dying. But potentially even more annoyingly, and as Will has found with his dodgy door module, some parts can take up to 12 weeks to ship out from Germany. Now that's maybe not the end of the world when it's something like a door module, but we know of situations or scenarios where owners have been left stranded because their car does not drive anymore and the part's going to be 3 months away. That's just ridiculous. Now look, that's maybe not the end of the world if it's something like a door module, but the problem is we've read so many scenarios where owners have been left with their car just not drivable at all. And that means you can't drive around in your lovely C-Class for up to 3 months. And then we come to the command infotainment systems. But you know what? Let's just do the positives first. To actually use, it is fantastic. Honestly, one of the best infotainment systems out there, even on the pre-update cars. The native interface is super intuitive to use, and being left-handed in a right-hand drive car, I adore it. Also, the sound quality from the standard stereo is excellent, but the premium stereos, absolutely phenomenal. And even though the C-Class technically didn't receive Apple CarPlay and Android Auto until the 2018 update, Do your research, because there are ways of fitting that technology to pre-update cars. The best bet here is jump on the owners groups and forums. There's plenty of great advice. However, one thing you'll also find on all of those owners groups and forums are all of the complaints about the command infotainment systems. We're talking incredibly slow to operate or just even fail completely. The sat-nav can be totally rubbish. The Bluetooth connection can drop out to the point that you have to repair your phone over and over again. Screens can lock up, or the newer touch screens can be guilty of ghost touching, where it selects something on your behalf without your consent. Now, quite often a simple software update can fix so many of these issues, but there are also plenty of owners out there that have had to replace actual hardware items, and guess what? Mercedes-Benz OEM parts, they're not cheap. But again, remember, thousands of owners out there haven't had any issues with their command infotainment systems or the interiors at all. Their C-Classes are proving to be absolutely bulletproof when it comes to reliability. Now, enough of the potential issues for a second. Let's talk about the huge amount of kit that these things can potentially come with. Now, I say potentially because even though the C-Class does come really well equipped as standard, you are going to find way more stuff as standard in something like a Genesis G70. But back to the C-Class, as you'd expect, the update then enhances the overall interior vibe plus the levels of technology and equipment. But look, even though these do come very well equipped as standard, let's be honest here, how many original owners actually left those option boxes unchecked in the first place? So many on the used market will feature one of the various design or equipment packages, or maybe one of the countless optional extras like the 14 different wheel designs, or the air balance package with its filtered air that can be infused with a fragrance of your choice. Seriously, a heavily optioned C-Class can feel like a slightly scaled down S-Class. They really can be that opulent. Although, just like the S-Class, there's a chance that a lot of those optional extras won't work anymore, although they might, who knows. And then in terms of safety, I mean, it's a Mercedes-Benz. Of course, it is ultra safe. In fact, there are so many safety features, we can't talk you through them all because we'd be here for bloody days. Just know that you're probably going to be safer in here than you are out there. And look, anyway, if you do need all of the specific details, again, ReDriven.com, it's all on the free cheat sheet. And then in terms of actually using this beautiful interior as far as practicality goes, you don't have a glove box as such, it's more of a glove bucket. It's so deep and sort of folds down like that. You've got a spot for 2 drinks here, and they've got the little grabby finger thing, so you should be able to fit a small pretentious coffee in there. Although, you'd think you'd be able to put your phone there, but it doesn't really, like, it closes, but then if you're charging it, that's going to get in the road of your small pretentious coffee like a Piccolo or a double ristretto. You've got a bisexual center console because it opens both ways, really good. Got a spot for sunglasses just up there. Nothing under the seats. Really good sized door bins, and they're angled just perfectly. Nothing under there. It's okay for practicality up front. Now on the back seat, I'm exactly 14 centimeters taller than another Mercedes product that is generally excellent but seems to be struggling of late, Sir Lewis Hamilton. This is in my driving position, and it's fine, like good amount of knee room. The seats are sort of comfortable. They're not the most comfy back seat I've sat in, certainly not the worst. It's fine back here, footroom's okay. Transmission tunnel is massive, so I'd hate to sit in the middle, but yeah, it's all right. One positive though, this back seat does get a bit of a workout with kids and adults and whatnot, and the resilience, a bit like the front, resilience to wear and tear is excellent. No scratches, or a few little tiny scratches, but really good for wear and tear. And then as far as features and practicality in the back seat, obviously pull down armrest with storage under here, little slide out cup holders, and they've got great little fingers and stuff so you can hold a small pretentious coffee, which is great. Map pockets, good sized door bins, and air vents. But the air vents, this is something I love about Mercedes-Benz cars. There's a tactility to the way the vents move, and I could do this for days. That is so satisfying. And then when we come to the boot, obviously being the wagon doesn't just mean that you've got the coolest body style of all the C-Classes, you also have the most practicality. And with the seats down, you have all of this space, and hey, Audi, notice this, in the Merc, it lays flat. But with all of this coolness and practicality, and this is something I said in the Audi A4 video, why would you buy any other body style? This is clearly the winner, especially the convertible and the coupe. Get this one. Although, there might be an issue with this whole area of the car, and I'm going to get Will, the owner of the car, to hand me something. Thanks, mate. Also, massive shout out to Will. Not only does he own this car, he is a hell of a C-Class expert, and he's going to be going home with a free set of Wipertech wiper blades as a thank you present. Guess how much a replacement retractable cargo blind is? $2,000. Yeah, insane. Okay, now what commonly goes wrong when it comes to the driving experience? Well, the big complaint we have found time and time again was all surrounding the quite harsh ride quality, especially on the standard run flat tires, and especially if the car's featuring an AMG line pack. Now in this car, this does have run flat tires on it, and yeah, my God, the suspension or the lack of ride quality is nuts. It's okay on sort of loping bumps, but the minute you hit small bumps or high frequency kind of road surfaces, it's so harsh. That initial impact, it's like it hasn't got tires at all. But the good news here is that plenty of owners mentioned that simply by fitting premium quality non-run flat tires, that can transform the ride quality of the car and also improve things like handling and steering, sometimes even fuel economy. Next up, a lot of owners of really the earlier cars with some of the earlier generation of active safety features have said that the calibrations of the safety features are a little bit too intrusive, a bit too sensitive, that the car will dive on the anchors at the slightest thought that it might hit something. But then on the flip side of that, owners of more recent cars with some of the more autonomous driving tech have said that that is some of the best autonomous driving tech in any car, anywhere, at any price. But look, aside from those complaints, what an absolutely bloody lovely car to drive. Now this is a C250, so pretty much the middle of the range, and it's so smooth and effortless. Okay, on a rough road, maybe not that smooth, but power-wise, just gets up and moves beautifully. It's wonderful. Actually, just on the engine, this feels far quicker than what the numbers actually suggest, but then at the same time, it feels completely refined. And look, I know plenty of owners have complained about loads of rattles and creaks and weird noises in the interiors. In this one, no, not at all. If you go over a really steep incline, you can hear a little bit of chassis creaking, but hardly anything. You've got to be listening out for it. No rattles. But I think the issue I have with this is that as utterly wonderful as it is to drive, as brilliantly as it just does car, it's not a standout. Now look, I know that might sound like a negative, but it's actually a positive for us because it shows that we have so many cars of this caliber and quality to choose from. But I think I was just hoping to be blown away by this driving experience, and as lovely as it is, I'm just not. Again, look, I'm not saying this is bad to drive, it's not. Again, it's just wonderful, but so is pretty much everything else in this class. But unfortunately, there's potentially another big issue we need to talk about here, and that is what mechanically can go wrong with these. Well, unfortunately, I can't tell you that because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But you know who is? It's Jim.
Now I'm going to start by saying the 1.5 and the 2 litre petrols are very similar, so I'm going to group all those problems together. By far the worst mechanical issue you might come across on one of these is the piston failure. There are plenty of owners that have experienced piston failure, either they break around the ringland or the skirt breaks off. It is very well documented. It does affect the earlier models, 15 to 17, but it happens to all of them. Now Merc obviously won't release exact numbers on how many of these fail, and the internet can blow this type of thing out of proportion. But let me assure you, there are plenty of them with broken pistons. And chances are, if it has a broken piston and if it's done any damage to the bore, you're likely to need a complete new engine, which will be stratospherically expensive. The timing chains in these things, they can be problematic. They can stretch and get rattly. Not a lot of reports of catastrophic failures, but timing chain replacement is a thing. Again, it's one of those things that's way worse when the vehicle hasn't had a good service history. Another less slightly expensive issue, but just as common, is turbo failure, although the turbos often fail in these if the car has been serviced poorly. Oil starvation is the issue here. Another issue the turbo has is with the wastegate control actuator. Now, according to Mercedes, you can't buy that part separately. You've got to buy a whole new turbo, but you can buy aftermarket components for those, much cheaper. Now, the water pump in these is a typically Mercedes, unnecessarily complicated component. It fails often and it's quite hard to get at. It's a couple of hours work to do it. It has a vacuum actuated bypass valve in it, which just gets stuck basically and can cause overheating issues, and it's an absolute nightmare. Yeah, you'll probably need to do a water pump at some point. Another issue in the cooling system is the thermostat on these. Quite often it gets stuck, and thankfully usually gets stuck in the open position, so the car just tends to run at a cold temperature, it'll log a fault code and tell you that's happening. But yeah, pretty common problem. We come across this when we're servicing these, when we go to do spark plugs in these. The coils just break when you pull them out, and you have to be extremely careful, and it's quite often impossible to get them out without breaking. So if you're doing a service on and spark plugs, just have a bit of a contingency to actually put coils in it too. We do see occasionally on these cylinder misfires caused by faulty injectors. Not terribly common, but yeah, we have seen a few. Engine breather and PCV complications are fairly common too. It is a very complex system. There's an upper and a lower oil separator. Now, if the lower oil separator has any issues, it is a nightmare to get at. You have to pull the whole inlet manifold off to get at it. It's just a nightmare. But yeah, it does happen, unfortunately. Now, onto the diesels in these. Now, this engine, or a variant of this engine, is in a lot of Mercs. It's an absolute workhorse for Mercedes, and actually overall it's not a bad engine. Unlike a lot of other Euro stuff and the petrols, the timing chains in these, the diesels, are actually pretty good, and it's a good design. It's a very short chain, and it only runs the camshafts. Everything else, like the fuel pump, the vacuum pump, and the balance shafts, they're all gear driven, and typically a gear driven setup just lasts much longer. I will add though that if any of those components need repairing, yes, they're gear driven, but if any of those fail, they're really hard to get at. Again, they're right under the manifold, require a lot of work to get at, and can be pricey. But thankfully, a lot of those components on these are actually pretty good. Another problem we see on these engines, which is pretty common, is oil leaking around the valve cover gasket. You need to take the injectors out to do the valve covers on these, which is a bit of a pain, but well worth doing, because another issue we see is the injector seals leaking. And when they leak, they can create what we call black death. It's just a carbon that comes out and it solidifies, and it can glue those injectors in and make it near impossible to get them out. Yeah, very good idea to get those injector seals done. When those injector seals fail, sometimes you can hear a bit of a chuffing noise, but typically these engines are so well insulated, quite often you can't hear it, so it's a bit of a trap there. If you're in there doing those injectors, another common problem is the return line on those injectors. It's all plastic fittings, and those plastic fittings get very brittle after 1,000 heat cycles, and quite often they will break. So it's not a bad idea to have one of those return line setups ready to go. They are very expensive through Merc, a few $100, but you can get aftermarket ones for a fraction of that cost, and they're just as good. Another thing to look out for on these is where the fuel filter is housed. It actually forms part of a coolant outlet, and sometimes that coolant outlet, the seals leak, and it just dribbles all down the side of the engine, so that's something to look out for. Occasionally we see DPF complications. Now, before you go throwing the DPF under the bus and putting a new one in and spending thousands, make sure you don't have any other complications like a boost leak, which we do see, or a clogged up map sensor, which we also do see. Check those first. The EGR valve on these, it does tend to clog up pretty badly. Look, it's expensive to buy through Mercedes, but not that expensive to buy an aftermarket one. Pretty common problem. So yeah, you're probably going to have to do an EGR valve at some point. Now, the hybrid setups in these, look, they're actually fairly unpopular in Australia, and they're proving to be relatively unreliable as well compared to other manufacturers. The batteries, the power delivery units, and the hybrid control modules are all prone to failure. Not terribly common, but they do fail. And owners will tell you if any of those parts ever need repair, it is eye-wateringly expensive, and in some cases the parts are hard to get to. So given the complexity and the likely cost of repairs, from a mechanic's perspective, I would avoid those hybrids.
But there's another issue that the C-Class might have, and it's all of the other cars that you could buy instead that pretty much tick all of these boxes. Lexus IS, BMW 3 Series, Alfa Romeo Giulia, Audi A4, Genesis G70, even cars like the Skoda Superb, Volkswagen Arteon and Kia Stinger all have just as many pros and cons as the Merc. Although the Genesis and the Lexus tend to have far fewer reliability and build quality concerns than this, they also tend to hold their value incredibly well. And then the Alfa Romeo, that is one of the best cars I've ever driven, and it's absolutely stunning. Look, what I'm trying to explain is that we just think you deserve better than what Mercedes-Benz is producing, especially if you're a fan of these. Look, we can go on and on for days about objective factors like the cost of parts, build quality and reliability scores, depreciation, all of the facts and figures that paint the C-Class in a bad light. But they fail to consider the emotional connection that we feel towards premium brands like Mercedes-Benz. Look, Mercedes-Benz has built their entire reputation and image on incredible engineering and exceptional build quality. And we don't deny for a second, there are plenty of C-Class out there that exhibit these attributes. But then so many others, they simply don't. and you deserve better than that. And that's why we think you're actually better off buying one of these instead, or maybe even one of these. But I've got a question for you. If you weren't to buy either of these two or this, what would you buy instead? Let us know in the comments. See you next time. Now we're just going to be focusing on the 4th generation, or the 205. Well, for so many owners, unfortunately no, Mercedes won't replace this under warranty because it